Coming up on Network Africa, at least 29 people killed in floodwaters and landslides in the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, following an unusual heavy rain. South Africa marks National Youth Day, reflecting on the pivotal role young people played in the country's liberation struggle. Plus, President Cyril Ramaphosa arrives in Calgary for the G7 summit. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. Let's begin with a recap of stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
On Friday, family of deceased Kenyan blogger Albert Ojwang called for justice over his death while in police custody. Ojwang's father, Meshach Ojwang Opio, blamed the government for taking things slow, calling for a public statement from his son's complainant. Albert Ojwang was arrested over a post on X that allegedly criticized Deputy Inspector General of Police, Eliud Lagat. Police initially claimed he was found unconscious in his cell and later died in hospital. Meanwhile, a post-mortem found that he had suffered severe head trauma, neck compression and multiple soft tissue injuries consistent with external assault. Earlier in the week, Kenyan President William Ruto commented on the blogger's death, saying all criminals, whether civilian or in uniform, had to be dealt with firmly and decisively.
They were supposed to protect him and Albert was in their hands. He actually even called a friend and asked the friend if he was going to be safe. This is somewhere where, if you're in a police custody, this is somewhere we are supposed to be protected and our lives are not supposed to end in this particular place. So it's heartbreaking.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa visited the region where devastating floods left at least 78 people dead in the country's southeast. President Ramaphosa traveled to the town of Umtata in Eastern Cape Province after a briefing by officials from the National Disaster Management Center and also visited a bridge where a school bus was washed away by flooding. 6 students, the bus driver, and another adult on board were confirmed dead, while 4 other school children were among those still missing. Head of the provincial government said the rescue effort was paralyzed in the first few hours of the floods because of a lack of resources like specialized search and rescue teams, divers and KDOG 9 units in one of the country's poorest regions. The first group of 249 South African troops have returned home from the peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The troops traveled from the DRC cities of Goma and Sake through Rwanda, then Tanzania, and landed at Waterkloof Air Force Base outside Pretoria on Friday night, following a 6-hour delay.
As soon as you've gotten something warm, you come out, you fall in here, then they will divide you into your rank groupings.
The South African troops' withdrawal was announced in May, following a high-level consultation with several role players in the peacekeeping efforts within the eastern DRC. Earlier this year, 14 South African soldiers lost their lives in DRC as M23 group gained control over Goma. On Saturday, hundreds of supporters of Côte d'Ivoire's main opposition party, the PDCI, took to the streets of Abidjan, calling for the reinstatement of their presidential candidate Tidiane Tiem to the electoral list ahead of a crucial vote. The CAP-CI opposition coalition, comprising 24 parties, including the Democratic Party of Côte d'Ivoire, has rejected the state's decision to bar 4 candidates from the presidential race, accusing the government of manipulating the judiciary to sideline political opponents. In April, a court disqualified Tidiane Tiem from running in the election, ruling that he held French nationality at the time of his registration, contravening Article 48 of the Ivorian Nationality Code. Mr. Tiem described the ruling as an act of democratic vandalism, accusing the ruling party of using the courts to eliminate its most serious rival. Supporters of pro-government Patriotic League of Uganda staged a rally outside the German embassy in Kampala, accusing German Ambassador Matthias Schoer of interfering in Uganda's internal affairs. The protest follows a statement issued last month by an official claiming Ugandan intelligence services raised concerns over the German ambassador's conduct. Youth leader Edison Kuhimba accused Shoa of meddling in internal affairs and colluding with enemies. The PLU leader, General Mtuzi Kainerugaba, who serves at the head of Uganda's defense forces and is the eldest son of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, accused Berlin of interference following a visit by an EU mission to the leader of the opposition, Bobi Wine. And finally, the Democratic Republic of Congo's government in Goma met with the leaders of the Alliance Fleuve Congo and M23 movement representatives to discuss the ongoing situation in the country. According to the head of United Nations mission in the DRC, Bintou Keita, the visit comes at a crucial time in a context of persistent tension.
Deaths have been reported in the Democratic Republic of Congo as unusual heavy rains this dry season caused heavy flooding, killing 29 people. The Interior Ministry says homes have been washed away, roads flooded, and widespread power cuts recorded as a third of the city was affected by the downpour. The country's meteorological agency says that 90 millimeters of rain was recorded on Saturday morning alone, higher than on any single day during the rainy season that lasts from November till May. Experts say the heavy rains are being fueled by climate change. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is in Canada alongside other G7 leaders for a summit, which will be first for Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. The summit is, however, overshadowed by an escalating conflict between Israel and Iran and U.S. President Donald Trump's unresolved trade war with allies and rivals alike. The war in Ukraine is also expected to be on the agenda. President Volodymyr Zelensky is due to attend the summit and is expected to meet with the U.S. President Donald Trump, a reunion coming just months after their bruising Oval Office encounter, which laid bare the risks of having a meeting with the U.S. president. And back home in South Africa, today is National Youth Day, reflecting on the pivotal role young people played in the country's liberation struggle, particularly the historic 1976 Soweto uprising. This year's commemoration is being held under the theme, Skills for the Changing World, Empowering Youth for Meaningful Economic Participation. Deputy President Paul Mshetile, who led the official Youth Day ceremony in the Northwest Province on behalf of President Cyril Ramaphosa, underscores youth unemployment as one of the most pressing socio-economic challenges facing the country today.
They are confronted by high levels of unemployment, inequality, and a lack of access to opportunities, especially in the digital world. As government, we acknowledge that for these young people, their reality remains unstable, undesirable, and unsustainable. According to Stats SA, young people between the ages of 15 and 34 make up just half of South Africa's working age population, about 20.9 million people in number. However, far too many of them can't find work, especially those between the ages of 15 and 24. Currently, South Africa's unemployment rate has gone up to 32.9%, and if we include people who gave up looking for work, the rate jumps up to 43.1%.
Staying in South Africa, the country marks 1 year since its establishment of the Government of National Unity. formed in the aftermath of the 2024 general elections. The coalition came into existence after the African National Congress fell below 50%, securing just 40% of the national vote. Well, to assess the country's progress under this coalition government, we're now being joined by political analyst Sanette Solomon. Sanette, pleasure to have you on the program.
Thanks again for having me.
So 1 year on, how would you assess the overall performance of government of national unity?
I think that the government of national unity has had quite a number of hiccups since the onset, and we can't believe that it's only been a year. We know that politically there has been a lot of disagreements on certain things, with the most recent examples being the budget that couldn't be passed, and obviously then having budget number 3 approved. Then there were other instances of policies that the GNU partners couldn't agree on, amongst those being the Land Expropriation Act. We've seen quite a number of instances where the parties within the GNU struggle to find cohesion. And I think as a result of that, they struggle to deal with key issues such as the economy, addressing poverty, unemployment, and so on. So I don't think that it has managed to achieve most of what it has wanted to do. But I think in terms of something that it has done, I think that political stability is definitely one of the key things that we can say it made progress on.
Right. We do know that the GNU has diverse, interests, and especially with its composition. What have been some of the key challenges in forming a cohesion?
Okay, so in terms of the different policies, as you would know, the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance obviously have their own key policies or things that they would prioritize within themselves. And I think that that has translated on in terms of how they would want certain things to work. We know that there was the implementation of what was called the Bella Act, which would allow government to obviously decide on the language of instruction for certain school. There was a lot of standardization that would take place. That was something that the ANC was in favor of and something that the Democratic Alliance was opposed to. But what was interesting was that the Minister of Education was a member of the DA, but obviously would have to implement the Bella Act, which is something that her political party was opposed to. So I think that was something that was quite challenging. We know that there hasn't been land reform in South Africa for quite a number of years, and we've been talking about that. And I think that there's obviously been a lot of discussions on what an expropriation act would be and what it would entail. And we know that the ANC was more in favor of that, whereas the DA had quite a number of things that it highlighted it was not in favor of in terms of that specific act. And that was something that they also did not necessarily agree on. Then we saw more recently, as I mentioned, with the budget speech, where there was a possible increase in the value-added tax that would obviously increase the price of goods. Despite them zero-rating certain items, that was something that the DA and other parties, such as the MK party led by or influenced by Jacob Zuma, and the EFF, which is led by Julius Malema, was opposed to, and something that the ANC was in favor of. So we've seen quite a number of instances where there were big policies and or acts or other legislation where these GNU partners would not necessarily be seeing eye to eye on these items. And obviously that would then be translated in terms of the media, and obviously everybody else would then become aware of those differences that these different parties comprising of the GNU or making up the GNU obviously don't agree on.
Right. And has the coalition managed to deliver on any of its promises to South Africans?
I think that they are trying to make progress. I think that economically we are not as bad as we possibly could be. So I think that that's something that's more positive. I think that a lot of people were quite concerned about the possible breaking up of the GNU. And I think a year in, I think that's something that we could quite be proud of as a country. But I think that there's quite a lot that they need to be done. You unfortunately can't do or undo years of poor and bad governance in 1 year. So as you rightfully know, we we still struggle with high levels of inequality. With us being one of the most unequal countries globally, we have high levels of poverty, high levels of like, obviously our inflation isn't what it could be. We have a lot of graduates that are still looking for employment opportunities, but general just unemployment. Then obviously there is infrastructure development is something that we need to work towards, whereas you'll have some towns and cities better managed than others. So that's something that we need to work on. And obviously service delivery. But I think in time we will see progress. But I don't think that it has happened as rapidly as the GNU partners would have liked it to happen.
Right. Sunette, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And still to come on the program. Young African entrepreneurs are building bridges between China and Africa. Find out how in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. There will be no hindering the Zambian government's involvement in funeral plans regarding former President Edgar Lungu, as issues regarding this have been resolved. Mr. Edgar Lungu, who led Zambia from 2015 to 2021, died 11 days ago in South Africa, where he was receiving treatment for an undisclosed illness. According to his family, he had left instructions that his political rival and current president, Hakainde Hichilema, should not come anywhere near his body. However, a spokesperson for the Lungu family confirmed that an agreement had been reached with the government that allowed for Mr. Hichilema to preside over a state funeral next Sunday. Well, Africa will be bearing the repercussions of conflict between Israel and Iran, as well as other conflicts as it impacts trade, the economy, and eventually political alignment. Speaking on our Foreign Affairs program, Diplomatic Channel Security and Public Affairs analyst Alexander Okonkwo says countries like Nigeria need to observe carefully developments surrounding conflicts around the world. He says the impacts of these will be far-reaching on the continent.
What happens with Israel and Iran automatically concerns China, North Korea, and Russia on one side, and then the US and a very divided EU on another side. So already we're already back at the West and East bloc again, even though it doesn't really exist like that. Now, add to that the trade wars we have already. We already have trade wars as we're talking. We already have the economy of the world being disrupted, and we add to it global conflict. Have you not noticed, you must have read about it, the airlines in the Middle East have cancelled some of their flights because while they are flying around, these jets are flying as well. You can have accidents with civil aviation. So it's going to disrupt all the system. Don't forget, that is the main route of transport as well. I think goods coming from China go through the Red Sea and come into Africa and parts of Europe. If all these are disrupted, you and I will pay 3-4 times whatever we're paying for any goods that are coming from China. That's one. The same thing for the Europeans. The petroleum will rise. It's already rising, but it will go to levels over $100 where nobody will be able to afford anything. And so while it is not localized with us now, we should keep a very open eye on the conflict, because the time will come when everybody will call to position himself either with the right or with the left. So to say, I don't want to use the evil and the good. That will be judging. But I will say the right or the left. At one point, each country, each community, each continent will be called to position themselves. And that is how World War started. That's all. So let us not assume that this is just a kid's play.
So I hate to say this, but it seems like we are on the periphery of a major world war. I mean, not just about Israel and Iran, but there's also, what's it called now, Russia and Ukraine. And then we have conflicts on the continent as well that we're fighting, which makes it, puts us even in a weaker position to actually influence anything.
Yes, it is. You're very correct. But our localized conflicts are secondary. You forgot a major conflict, which is Pakistan, Iran. Pakistan, India. Yeah. And they are on the bridge of war as well as we speak right now. And the two countries have nuclear. So what is going to happen eventually if it escalates and expands? Those are two words. It can escalate and also expand. Because it can actually escalate without expanding. But if it escalates and expands, all these other countries I've mentioned will be called to join one way or the other. And we can bet where India is going and where Pakistan is going. And we can bet where Brazil will go to and where Canada will go to. So, and that is how wars start. But in terms of what concerns Africa, our risk for now is more economic than I would say political, because we will not be asked immediately to join hands. And Nigeria is in a very good position. We are non-aligned. We're a non-aligned nation. So what it does means is that we talk to everybody. We have friends in China, we have friends with the US, we have friends with the EU. So we are non-aligned, unlike maybe some other countries in Africa that are actually aligned and they would have to join one of the axes or not. So for now, I would say, and there's no need to be too scared about it, it is more of an economic risk in terms of prices doubling and access to goods reducing. And in fact, people not investing, because countries are going to be investing more in ammunition and arms and safety than in, I don't know, in tomatoes or groundnut oil.
You can watch more of Alexander Okonkwo's thoughts on the conflict between Israel and Iran on Diplomatic Channel. It airs tonight at 8:30 on Sky 515 in the UK and at 11:30 on DSTV 420. Or you can catch it, the playlist on catch the playlist on Channels Television on YouTube. And we're in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where more than 2.5 million displaced people have returned to their homes, often to areas where basic services have been severely disrupted. The United Nations Development Programme reports that since January 2025, the M23 rebel group has seized control of Goma and Bukavu, displacing 4.1 million people. Houses have been burnt and schools destroyed. They've also been looted, with the health centers lacking essential supplies, livelihoods vanished, and many families struggling to restart their lives. The report says the crisis is not only humanitarian, it's a development emergency and an economic collapse, as banks remain closed, markets are disrupted, and access to income has been decimated. However, the UNDP reaffirms critical support from fighting rising epidemics and delivering HIV/TB medication to creating jobs and rebuilding infrastructure, as well as scaling up support for survivors of SGBV through psychosocial care, legal assistance, safe spaces, and income-generating opportunities.
UNDP is in these communities to help restore local economies, support small businesses, create jobs, particularly for women and youth, who are often the most affected by the conflict.
As diplomatic efforts continue to end fighting in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, the UN Development Agency has issued an appeal on behalf of people uprooted by the violence to help them rebuild their lives and their livelihoods. Since the beginning of the year, Rwanda-backed M23 fighters have swept across eastern DRC, taking key cities including Goma and Bukavu. The violence has displaced more than 1 million people in Ituri, North Kivu and South Kivu provinces. Speaking from the village of Sake in North Kivu, UNDP resident representative Damien Mama described meeting a woman whose house had been destroyed after she fled the advancing fighters in January.
The stories people are telling me, it has been the major position, the last position that the M23 was able to take before moving and taking Goma. Without taking Sake, they could not move further to Goma. And you remember that this was the place where the former governor was also killed in action. So what's needed is also restoring businesses, providing income-generating activities to women and the youth, creating jobs, and also basically also responding to one of the major issues here is sexual and gender-based violence.
The Vatican has beatified a Congolese customs worker who was killed for resisting a bribe, giving young people in a place with endemic corruption a new model of holiness. Someone who refused to allow spoiled rice to be distributed to the poor people. At the event, which happened on Sunday, the head of the Vatican's saint-making office, Cardinal Marcelo Sameraro presided over the beatification ceremony of Floribert Buonarroti City on Sunday at one of the pontifical basilicas in Rome, St. Paul, outside the walls. The event attracted a cheering crowd of Congolese pilgrims and much of Rome's Congolese Catholic community, who will be treated to a special audience on Monday with Pope Leo. A young entrepreneur from Mali, Khalifa C. Diop, has been promoting investment opportunities in his home country at the Hunan Urban Planning and Design Institute. He said that he was inspired by the second China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo held in Changsha, which opened his eyes to Hunan's advanced engineering machinery and medical equipment. He also facilitated the establishment of sister city ties between Changsha and Sikasso in Mali. In June 2024, the Mali Business Center was officially inaugurated. Another entrepreneur from Benin Republic, Ojo Richard, obtained a startup visa after graduation and set up his company in the International Youth Entrepreneurship Group Hub within the China-Hunan Pilot Free Trade Zone. The entrepreneurs said that they were impressed by platforms like the China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo and the Pilot Zone for the in-depth cooperation. That's Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.